Is cryptocurrency or virtual currency creating enough nuisance in the market? And how an Indian company or a South Asian company can move ahead and start business in US. So let's welcome Clay. Morning, Clay. How are you?
Great, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. I know it's evening there, but it's early morning here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Direct seller ratio in terms of the company's turnover. Is it practically possible to do this thing? Is it happening? Now in India, actually, there's still the lawmaking is still not about income disclosure as of now. And people play around with it, so whosoever has an association or clout with the government, they tend to play around with income disclosure. Do you think that works? Is it an effective way of controlling the unfair trade practices or the misrepresentation of the claims, making a full
Absolutely
disclosure
not.
of the?
Yeah, absolutely not. The income claim is probably one of the most ambiguous.
Do you think that direct selling will survive or grow at the same speed in these coming years, or do you think it will be a challenge in this industry?
I'm very optimistic for the direct selling space, but I'll qualify that with if.
Hello and welcome to Direct Selling Today podcast. Today we have an amazing personality, a person who not only follows direct selling passionately, but pursues it as a passionate business and understands it deeply enough to guide us how to start business in US. Today we have Clay with us who will be guiding us on all the processes and things that are required to start a business in US, but more importantly, does direct selling, affiliate, network marketing is creating enough presence? Is cryptocurrency or virtual currency creating enough nuisance in the market? And how an Indian company or a South Asian company can move ahead and start business in US. So let's welcome Clay. Morning, Clay. How are you?
Great, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. I know it's evening there, but it's early morning here in Nashville, Tennessee. So,
Uh, it's a good to start. It's actually almost night. It's 10 a.m. But we can. The beauty of the business is, we can talk across the continents. So, Clay,
exactly.
one thing that stands out is your articles that comes out in the LinkedIn, and it shows how much passionate you are about this industry and how deeply you understand this industry. How did this journey started? How did you become so passionate about this industry?
Yeah, so it goes back a long way, actually. So when I was little, I used to always attend conferences with my mom. So she was a director in Mary Kay, so a Dallas, Texas company. Of course, it's a worldwide company, right? And I always used to dress up in suits and kind of watch everyone go on stage. And then kind of once she left Mary Kay, because she also had a different job, a full-time job, I didn't really follow direct sales much, but I always kind of had that inkling from when I was little of how things were happening, how direct selling. Sure, it's a very niche market, but it also touches across a variety of different avenues, whether it's FDA, the Federal Trade Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission. It really touches all aspects of business. And then during COVID, I actually had just graduated law school, and Kevin Thompson, so the one of the managing partners at my firm, Thompson Burton in Nashville, Tennessee. I connected with him. We really hit it off, and kind of that opportunity opened up because Kevin Thompson's a big name in the industry. He's very passionate about it as well. And so I began working with him, and the more I got involved, it really kind of brought back that original passion from my childhood. And now, as you said, so I work a lot in direct sales, helping direct sales companies come to the United States, but also have a more corporate focus as well, to where we can help individuals pretty much do anything across the board, from establishing startup entities or existing entities that are wanting to kind of restructure their processes, et cetera, within the United States, and then perhaps expand across the globe as well. So it's been kind of coming full circle in my life. It's been a real pleasure.
Right. Great to know that, Clay. Uh, Now we'll touch some topics, and my first topic is about direct selling business or multi-level marketing or network marketing, by whichever word we addresses, is always perceived as something which has money circulation or a pyramid scheme. How do you help organizations actually fight it out? Do you create a processes for them? Do you guide them? Or in case the FTC or SEC, comes out with a claim that the particular organization is a pyramid scheme, how do you help them out? How do you guide the organizations?
Yeah, it can be really interesting right now with the current regulatory framework, especially in the United States. I'm sure it's quite similar across the globe, especially in India as well. But the main regulator within the United States when it comes to direct selling is the Federal Trade Commission. And so, under Section 5 of their powers of the FTC Act, they have the ability to monitor unfair and deceptive trade practices. And so, that's really how they find their power when it comes to income claims, product claims, pyramiding schemes, and things like that. The unfortunate reality is that there's guidelines from the FTC and other consumer protection agencies, but there's no clear way to do things right. For example, there's no, if you have 51% customers to distributor ratio, then you're not a pyramid scheme. The Federal Trade Commission recently in March of 2024 wrote a letter to the Direct Selling Association saying it's really kind of down to the operational realities of the company. And so it's extremely difficult to navigate those waters without really knowing the history of the industry itself. And so that's what's really fun to me is you are able to help these entrepreneurs because it's not my job to remove risk. So I recently wrote an article that says that if you want to work in direct sales or be an entrepreneur itself and remove risk, that's more of an oxymoronic statement, right? Because by nature of being of being an entrepreneur, you have to be able to appreciate the risk. And so it's my job to help provide a path forward for these entrepreneurs by helping them understand the risk, but also avoiding kind of a paralysis through analysis, which I think a lot of companies have struggled with as of late, which I think leads to a lot of companies jumping from either in name only, not calling themselves a multi-level marketing company and saying something more of like an affiliate model, even though it might have multiple levels, or completely leaving the industry and going to an affiliate model, thinking that that will remove a lot of the regulatory scrutiny, when in fact, it's extremely important that multi-level marketing is to really hone in on that. And the field is how these companies are able to grow and share their products. And the community is really where the industry began. And so I'm very passionate about trying to return to that in the present day with social media, et cetera. Right. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but
No, that,
I love risk
that's a good
takers
one, Clay.
and kind of going from there.
Two things actually comes out from the discussion that you've just done it. So one is the 50% of the customer to the direct seller ratio. And the second thing is, you name it as an affiliate, a viral marketing, whatever way you want to put it. And then you put affiliate as single level, then there's multi-level affiliate that also comes up. And I read one of your articles about the beach body company, which wanted to
Mhm.
shift into this thing. Now, this is a growing phenomena now. When you look at European market, companies are looking at D2C, e-commerce, affiliate, want to
Mhm.
have a multi-level structure without having the name of MLM.
Right.
So how do you handle those things? How do you guide them? Do you actually tell them to remove the name MLM and do it? Or you say, okay, guys, black is black and white is white. You can't do it, anything.
Right. I wrote in my most recent article, I believe that you read and we discussed prior to the call, that if you call a cat a dog, it's still a cat, right? So there's no reason to hide behind what you are. And so whenever I meet with entrepreneurs that are either existing within the current industry or wanting to start a business in the industry, you really need to hone in on why you're going about the way you're going. And you need to really buy into the multi-level marketing aspect if that's something that you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to compete more so in the traditional network of like the Amazons or maybe an affiliate influencer model, then you need to really buy into that. But you shouldn't try to have your feet in both ponds, right? And you can't have your cake and eat it too, you know? So it's extremely important to really buy into what you're wanting to do. And when a management and leadership team can relay that to the field, then I think that really invigorates the field to want to buy. But if they're constantly in angst of whether you're going to change your model and take money out of their pocket without notice, I think it's extremely disingenuous. You should just own who you are, who you want to be, and go forward from there.
Sounds great, Clay. But let's look at this 51% customer to direct seller ratio in terms of the company's turnover. Is it practically possible to do this thing? Is it happening?
It's really tough because naturally, if a company has a great product and individual distributors love the product, they're going to buy it, right? It doesn't make any sense to sell something that you don't use yourself. It's not really how business or anything works, right? If I love it, I'm going to use it. I'm going to tell my friends and family about it. I'm going to post about it and do things like that. And so it's a very tough balance to distinguish between uh, distributors, distributor customers, and then non-distributor customers, right? So there's a recent case in September of 2023 in the United States called the Federal Trade Commission versus Neora. And in the Federal Trade Commission sued Neora, a Dallas, Texas-based company, stating in short, there's a multiple claims, but Neora won this case because the FTC tried to argue that brand partners that purchase product were not in fact customers. But New York kind of rebutted that, saying that, well, these individuals might be brand partners and they're enrolling, but they're doing so for the discounts and to kind of have that like preferred customer vibe, despite maybe not building a team. And so it's extremely important for companies to kind of have that tangible data to use in the event the FTC tries to paint with a broad brush. I don't like to, I mean, obviously, the more customers you have that aren't in your opportunity, the better. It's easier to distinguish, but you really want to avoid the aspect that people are buying maybe the minimum to qualify each month, for example. That's a really bad sign. And that maybe individuals are distributors and the only ones buying your product, right? Because a lot of times companies will force distributors to buy their products, and that's a recipe for disaster because you really can't distinguish, even if they are buying it for the genuine value, it's impossible to tell, right? And if you don't have the data to rebut the FTC, then their arguments will win the day.
But this is an interesting take, Obviously, everybody knows that after, Neura came out with flying colors and it was spread, this news went across all the global. And but it's a genuinely a challenge. I mean, some if an FTC comes or any regulatory body will come and tell you that your distributors only buying for their position or for subscription, just to have that being an active status. Uh, do they really count if the data of the customer doesn't go to the FTC, or only they count that direct seller has made the self purchase? Will they treat this as a sale done to a customer, or they will just say that this has been just simply eyewash to maintain your level?
Yeah, this is one of the fine gray areas of the industry right now. And so, like I said, that case, the judge's opinion came out in September of 2023. And then in March of 2024, the FTC wrote that letter to the Direct Selling Association here in the United States. And they pretty much just ignored that loss because that case only applies to that particular district in Texas. It's not like the Supreme Court of the United States made a decision and that's kind of how the entire country is to operate. Neora more so gave us a window into how to refute the Federal Trade Commission's rules. But in March of 2024, the FTC kind of tried to move the goalpost again somewhat by saying that it's based on, it's not a percentage based test. It's more so on is the let me think here. Is the plan, the business opportunity, is it driven by recruitment over product sales? And that's about as ambiguous as you can get. So that's where a lot of companies kind of freak out, and that paralysis through analysis, like I mentioned before, kind of comes into play. But it's so important to kind of know the law. And even if the FTC has certain guidelines, again, you don't want to just completely ignore them, but you need to have appropriate counsel and compliance teams to kind of build that data and build a case and constantly build up your defenses in the event they were to come knocking. Because just because they're a federal government agency does not mean that they are right on the law. Unfortunately, there'll probably be companies in the future, just like Neora, that will have to spend millions to defend themselves. But this is something that I think the worldwide direct selling industry needs to kind of team up together and push back on improper encroachments, right? Because last thing, and then I'll let you talk, but in 2021, the FTC lost in the Supreme Court of the United States, and I won't get into the academic details of it, but it was called Section 13B. And the FTC was using that power unconstitutionally for what was it, 45 years until a company took it all the way to the Supreme Court and had it removed from them. So, well, not unconstitutionally, but it was against the statute that they were trying to use. So they used the power for 45 years that the Supreme Court said they never had in the first place. So that's kind of the situation we're in right now.
There's another thing that, the letter of FTC or which went to the, Direct Selling Association was one about the non-compete law, and which said that, if you're a direct seller in one organization, you shouldn't work in any other company. And but the direct sellers wanted that they should be able to work in multiple organizations, and the direct selling companies didn't want it that non-compete thing. I think this also was highlighted pretty much everywhere.
That's correct. Yeah. So the Federal Trade Commission recently tried to pass a essential federal ban, subject to a few exceptions, on non-competes. And so that would not apply to concurrent work. So working, uh, it would apply to after the fact. So you can obviously prevent, like if I'm working at a law firm today, I can Kevin Thompson and Thompson Burton can prevent me from working at another law firm at the same time, right? That's not a violation of what they're trying to do. It was more so, can I leave company A and go to company B? Because there's a lot of non-competes that kind of say you can't within 6 months to a year, sometimes up to 2 years maybe. But non-competes have always been a creature of state law. And so I'm not sure how familiar your listeners are with the legal framework of the United States, but we have a federal law society, so like the federal government, and then each individual state, the 50 states can have their own kind of nuances within that. So it makes it kind of a fun game to play. But right now, the Federal Trade Commission, the federal non-compete ban, is being challenged. And so right now it is not in effect. And so non-compete still can exist within the United States, subject to the individual state laws, of course. But I would imagine that similarly to previous rulings, the non-compete probably would not
Enough.
pass muster. Yeah,
I think in India also we are a federal structure, and the lawmaking is also pretty similar. So we have three different lists of areas. So we have a center list or a union list, which a central government would make it. Then there are
mhm,
states which own, they have rights to make the laws on various subjects. And then there's a common subject, which we addresses as a concurrent list. So we
mhm.
actually understand this language, the fight between the center and the state. But yes,
Right.
I would say the US federal structure is, I think, a bit more better than what Indian structure is. In India, it's still a very, very compact when it comes to federal laws in India.
You said it,
Uh,
not
but
me.
but the position is, there's another thing I wanted to discuss is the income disclosure part. Now in India, actually, there's still the lawmaking is still not about income disclosure as of now. And people play around with it. So whosoever has an association or clout with the government, they tend to play around with income disclosure. Do you think that works? Is it an effective way of controlling the unfair trade practices or the misrepresentation of the claims, making a full
Absolutely
disclosure of
not.
the?
Yeah, absolutely not. The income claim is probably one of the most ambiguous quote unquote rules that the Federal Trade Commission kind of has when it comes to the direct selling space in particular. It obviously applies to other money making opportunities and investment opportunities and things. But I would say that the multi-level marketing companies, that's something that's extremely uh, difficult to abide by. And probably that in conjunction with product claims, when if you're a health and wellness company, for example, cause the most angst for companies because not only in the United States. So if a company makes a claim, that makes sense that they can be targeted by regulators for those improper claims, right? But even if your distributors make claims, those can be impugned to the company as well. And so it's extremely difficult to monitor a field of thousands of independent contractors making claims on Facebook, TikTok, or what have you, right? So there is no rule per se on how to go about income claims. We know you have to have an income disclosure statement, which kind of details the typicality earnings of a particular distributor at certain ranks and items like that. But the similar to the FTC's note to the DSA in March of 2024, they also sent a letter to the direct the Direct Selling Self-Regulatory Council, which is like an offshoot of the Better Business Bureau that kind of helps direct selling companies kind of walk the line when it comes to the regulatory scrutiny. And so the DSSRC had a income disclosure kind of guideline booklet that they would utilize to kind of help companies understand what these income claims are, what are proper, what are not proper. And the FTC simply said this is not at all correct. And again, there's case law on the books. I believe it's in the 1970s. It was called In-Rate National Dynamics. And all the arguments that the FTC continues to make when it comes to income claims were refuted in that case.
Wow.
And yet the FTC is trying to modify that once again and keep it in the ambiguity. And I believe it was on, let's say today's Thursday. So on Tuesday, despite a new administration coming in on Monday, the FTC issued additional rules trying to further constrict the income claims and keep it more ambiguous. And so whether that becomes law or not is to be determined. But again, the FTC, as we've seen, is trying to maintain that ambiguity to because if I give you a regulatory framework, then you know how to do it right, right? And so people will do it right. And it seems like the FTC is very determined on, for lack of a better term, destroying the industry. I think that they're not fans of it whatsoever because of the bad actors and bad connotations that MLM quote unquote brings. But it's my opinion that the more regulatory framework that we have, the better it is to weed out the bad actors. And because the ones that want to do it right need a way to do it right. But as long as that ambiguous gray exists, it makes it extremely difficult. And what is a good claim today might not be a good claim tomorrow. Or there could be the same claim on the same day and different companies, and they might not both pass muster. And it's extremely frustrating for a lot of companies. So I help kind of navigate that regulatory framework, knowing what the law is. And then I like to always explain it as being a spectrum. So if you want to have zero risk, you make no income claims. If you want to kind of get closer this way, then you kind of expose yourself a bit, but you're within the proper framework of the law in the books, like that national dynamics case. So it's
I
extremely
think that's a
interesting.
very interesting point. I think, and I could relate with what you were saying actually. I think most of the people of direct selling today, viewers will also relate. Ambiguity in law is actually creating a kind of a playing field where everybody is insecure. And I think then probably they'll have to pick up the spectrum or the rainbow from which area they have to play around.
Right,
And okay, now in this ambiguity business scenario, and with things moving to much more clarity, or we wish it will move, how do you
right.
think this industry will fight amongst the quick commerce guys, the e-commerce, the affiliate, the D2C? Do you
Mhm.
think that direct selling will survive or grow at the same speed in this coming years, or do you think it will be a challenge in this industry?
I'm very optimistic for the direct selling space, but I'll qualify that with if executives within the direct selling space want it to survive, right? So, as I mentioned at the outset of the call, and we've discussed previously, um, when a lot of companies want to shift from multi-level marketing to affiliate marketing, or even sometimes stay in that gray where you have to kind of tilt your head a little bit and see whether they're an MLM or not without expressly saying it. I think that really puts the industry behind the eight ball and makes it very difficult to grow. It's been my opinion. This might be a controversial take, but it's my opinion that influencers are like mercenaries, right? So they have no allegiance to individual companies. This is again painting with a broad brush, but if you pay someone X amount of money to market and sell your products based on how much of a following they already have, it's very easy for that individual to jump to the next shiny object that might pay more long term. But if you have that organic growth that the history of direct selling is really known for, where individuals first love the product, then they share it with their friends and family, they get together, have that personal interaction, that's where the growth of direct selling is. The growth of direct selling is not synonymous with competing with influencers or the Kim Kardashians or something of the world because they have a different audience that they're marketing to. Whether it's good products or not, I won't comment on because each individual product is different. But those influencers are more so trying to push quote unquote cheap products to the masses as opposed to trying to build a movement and really um, enjoy and appreciate what the mission of the company is. But as soon as the mission's lost, as soon as you try to compete with those e-commerce and other companies, I think it's a recipe for disaster. And then not to get into the specifics, but like Tupperware, for example, is an iconic brand in the MLM space. They started to put their things in Target, et cetera, and that kind of destroyed the dynamic of their company. And now they went through bankruptcy trying to kind of recover, but trying to I think you need to stick in your lane and grow with the times as opposed to trying to embed yourself within the fad of the day.
I think you've put in very beautifully, Clay. I think this is happening all around. Whenever the companies are not able to meet their target, they started exploring all the new options. And this first thing that comes out is a D2C, e-commerce. Let's set up an affiliate, get influencers on board. But you're right. I mean, I think what I'm seeing right now is actually direct selling going back to what its strength was in the year 2005 to say about the year 2010, where you actually slowed down the pace of the business, invested more time in the explanation, and you actually worked with the direct sellers. I mean,
Mhm.
after post 2010, it was all frenzy. You start a company and you immediately they're in 50 countries. I think the
Right.
time will change now. I think we'll get back to that same scenario.
Mhm.
Okay, now very important question, Clay, is let's look at Indian companies coming to US. Now, there has been a precedence about one or two companies coming to US, and US is the biggest market for you know, any company for in any vertical actually, and let alone the direct selling, which is the biggest market. Do you think Indian companies would have a chance to come to US and be successful in the small niche space, or you think it will be a struggle for Indian companies?
I think it's absolutely possible, but again, and I think with Indian companies, understanding the federal framework and how the United States operates being similar to India, broadly speaking, of course, I think that it's absolutely possible because the Indian market is booming right now. I mean, it's extremely high risk, high reward, but it's really coming along. And I think it's more difficult for American companies to go to India, not understanding maybe the framework of what products might be successful, et cetera. But the most successful companies that come to the United States don't try to do everything at once. They try to kind of start small and really build those pockets of commitment and trying to learn how the market works and being comfortable with that risk and understanding that Indian consumers might not be the same as American consumers, and that's the same across the board, right? And so once you kind of establish that framework, I think that it's always the product that drives everything. And then if you have a strong sales team, you can sell that product around. And right now, within the United States, something that I believe will be extremely successful and a lot of homegrown companies are failing to do, in my opinion, is focusing on the purity of the products, right? There are a lot of companies and a lot of distributors getting upset with companies because they're lowering the quality of their products. Again, this is painting with a broad brush. Not every company is doing this. There's plenty of great ones out there. I represent a lot of them. But people want to know what they're putting in their bodies. There's a big kind of health movement going on, especially with the Trump administration and kind of Robert Kennedy and that like Make America Healthy Again aspects. And people are really buying into that. And that kind of culture framework is really what permits things to grow organically, as opposed to trying to force maybe what you're doing in India on the American market. It's kind of bringing that new cultured aspects to the biggest economy in the world. I think that a lot of companies are leaving not just money, but just growth on the table by not entering this market because a lot of companies are fearful of the regulatory framework within the United States. But if you can operate and figure out how to deal with ambiguity and the spectrum of risk that I mentioned before within the United States, then it's very possible to offshoot to other locations because you understand what it takes to operate successfully here stateside. And so that's something that I really enjoy, and I'd love to bring more Indian and Southeast Asia countries, companies to the United States because it's a phenomenal country, a phenomenal economy, and it's great just to kind of connect everyone. And what you learn here can easily be transferred and taken back home to make your homegrown operations work better. So,
I think that's an excellent statement, Clay. And our readers and the people who are looking at, and there's a lot of organizations in India who are looking to grow now. And the moment you touch about, let's say, about 0.5 billion USD, you start exploring more business options. And
mhm.
US being the biggest market, they should look at it. So, and I believe you would be able to handhold them completely in terms of, the entire process, including the product clearances, the SEC compliance, the FTC compliances, and all the regulatory work, right? This is what you
Absolutely. Yes. We
specialize
do this every
into,
day. So
right?
like I said, we have a strong specialty in direct sales, but we also work with companies outside of the industry across the board. So it really kind of helps us uh, know how the industry itself is working with different companies that have different specialties of products, but then also how companies outside the industry are working. And it kind of exposes us to more avenues to be creative with our clients, which is really, really a fun thing.
Great, Clay. Great. I mean, there's so many questions, Clay. I mean, I can just keep on continuing my questions, but we have to, understand that this is a podcast, and we'll have to
Sure.
restrict the time because people these days they don't listen to too much of content these days.
Uh,
But we will keep on continuing this discussion, and I do believe that you bring a lot of value in terms of the knowledge that's in US. But I also see there's a lot of knowledge from the best practices of US that can come to India. And with this, I think we should, end this session, and we'll come to this end of this session. And maybe after 3, 4 months, I will again come back to you with another set of questions. So thank you so much, Clay, for coming on to a show. It's an early morning in US, and I know you have a very small kid. You have to take care of that.
right.
And looking forward to seeing you again, Clay. Thank you so much for coming on show.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.